Alright guys, before we get started, I do have to issue a quick warning. This movie is pretty complicated, and it's easy to get lost if you don't have the full context. I highly recommend you guys sit down and give this movie a watch before sitting through the video. That way you get to pick up on details and clues that I'll bring up. Plus, you get to watch a kick-ass action flick. There are no downsides.
Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
Yes? Of course, I'm here, just thinking.
Do you wanna be different? Do you wanna be strange? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of change? There's a new day dawning. You better run and hide. How you ever gonna change the world if you never try? Sunset City's crumbling. That time won't change a thing. We're living the nightmare. There's bodies everywhere. Sunset City is at war. Just knocking at your door. You've never seen anything like this ever before.
Hello? Look, I'm sure you have a lot on your mind, but I cannot imagine anything mattering more than the conversation we are now having concerning your tax liability.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is a phenomenal movie, easily one of the best to have come out this year. For those unaware, Everything Everywhere is the surrealist science fiction action comedy movie directed by Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, starring Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan, and Stephanie Su. The story follows a married couple of Chinese immigrants and their American-born daughter as they try to keep a failing laundromat afloat. Unfortunately, they had to prepare for a surprise visit from their disapproving grandfather, and at the exact same time, they're dealing with a tax audit from the IRS. It's a quirky, heartfelt film about family, of adjusting to a new culture while still keeping true to your roots, and accepting someone for who they are no matter what. And it's also a batshit insane multiverse story where a godlike entity is hunting down our protagonists, killing everyone that gets in the way. Yeah, Everything Everywhere is a pretty out there movie. For full context, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, also known as The Daniels, are very absurdist directors. The first film they directed together, Swiss Army Man, is also a very kooky story that dips into fantastical elements pretty hard, both to make a point and just to be goofy and fun. Now, Daniel Scheinert directed a solo film called Death of Dick Long, a substantially more grounded movie that is more of a crime thriller than anything else. But it's got a pretty massive twist that turns it into a black comedy, and I actively refuse to spoil that. Check it out, it's a good movie. The two decide to join up together again for this film, and it's another insane ride to say the least. Now, Everything Everywhere is trying to be a lot of different things all at once. It's a love letter to Hong Kong action films, a family drama, an absurdist comedy, a science fiction film, a philosophical exploration of themes such as nihilism and existentialism. There are a lot of plates this movie wants to spin, and shockingly, it all works. Now, for full disclosure, I usually don't care for multiverse stories. Personally think the vast majority dip too hard into just making a massive scale, to the point that it feels so big that you kind of stop caring about the story at large. What's the point in caring if there's a million other timelines to keep track of? Everything you do is rendered inconsequential in some form or another. Bad multiverse stories run into this problem a lot, to the point the only real solution is to ignore major chunks of the multiverse concept for the sake of a traditional story. Like how in BioShock Infinite they wanted a tragic sacrifice ending, so they had Elizabeth drown Booker during his baptism to make sure he can't go crazy and become a supervillain. Except the very idea of doing that doesn't work, since there will be timelines where Booker doesn't die and becomes evil anyway, or timelines where Booker doesn't get the baptism but still becomes evil, meaning this whole thing is pointless. This wouldn't even be a big deal if there weren't major parts of the game that addressed how new timelines are created and will span on into infinity. You know, BioShock Infinite. But no, constants and variables. Rick and Morty is another one that started to rub me the wrong way. Not out of any logical thing, I mean, it's a comedy show, you're not supposed to take it seriously. Mainly that it started to try and dip into being more dramatic, so all of the goofy shenanigans now have to be looked at in a way that stops being fun, and more that Rick is a horribly manipulative sociopath. I don't give a fuck this old dude tried to kill himself. Frankly, by this point, I'm more upset he didn't. It's fine when it was just jokes, but when you try to make a point and lean into being serious, you have to address characters being bad people. Rick and Morty not only does it, but it actually sort of celebrates being a nihilistic shitbag.
Am I evil?
Worse, you're smart.
When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours. And I've never met a universe that was into it. The universe is basically the ordinary. Creates infinite idiots just to eat them.
Did a fucking 12-year-old write this? Feel like even trying to mention Doctor Strange is just kind of a waste of time. Multiverse of Madness mainly uses the concept for cool spectacle stuff and references to Marvel concepts that they want to adapt later, like the Illuminati, and really the Fantastic Four / X-Men at large, also Marvel Zombies, and all around was just sort of a hollow attempt at the House of M storyline. It's not trying to do anything with the multiverse beyond being an action flick, so it just wouldn't be fair to hold it up to the same standards. Into the Spider-Verse is the better Marvel multiverse movie, just saying.
You break the rules.
Look out!
To become a hero. I do it. I become the enemy. It doesn't seem fair.
Maybe because Strange didn't mind rape an entire town to roleplay old sitcom shows? To the point they were begging for death? Then you went on a killing spree across the multiverse so you can get the imaginary children you never actually had back? Not just superheroes either, but completely innocent people you execute for no other reason than you're batshit crazy and evil. Multiverse of Madness was a waste of time. We're moving on. Of course, multiverse stories do have some serious gems in them, such as Virtue's Last Reward. That one is trippy as all hell. And of course, Everything Everywhere. This is a film that uses the multiverse concept in a way that never feels really condescending or as if it's trying to outsmart the audience. BioShock Infinite dipped into that, where the multiverse was only really there for the sake of sounding smart, because it does not mesh whatsoever with the political themes to it. Of course, the political themes to BioShock Infinite was just America racist, but that argument's so dead and buried. Nobody appreciated it too, but they sucked Infinite's dick. I'm still kind of mad.
Damn it. I thought once we were here, I could fully control it. I thought...
What is that?
It's a key.
Where did it come from?
It's always been there. I just couldn't see it.
No one fucking asked you, you fucking cocksucker!
Yeah, I really don't care for this video game. But no, instead the concept in Everything Everywhere is used to explore ideas of regret and missed opportunity. The Daniels have a talent for taking these batshit insane concepts and using them to tell stories about people and their relationships, using fantastical elements for telling a very human story. It doesn't go full M. Night Shyamalan, where the story sort of begins and ends at the out there concept and kind of forgets to connect it with larger human concepts. His new movie, Old, is an adaptation of a graphic novel called Sandcastle, but he mostly ignored the themes of inevitability and death in that story for the sake of talking about corporate exploitation, which is a lot less relatable and feels more watered down and generic. The movies mainly just take a concept and run with it instead of using it to tell a larger story. Instead, Everything Everywhere feels very similar to a Spike Jonze or Charlie Kaufman style, only a lot sillier, using out there ideas and relating them to everyday life and how we interact with others. Swiss Army Man covered ideas of isolation and being introverted, not being able to be a part of the world like how you want to. One of the best scenes in the movie is when the protagonist relates his regret and not being able to confess his feelings to a woman he loved, and the loneliness he feels and how much he misses just the small mundane parts of life.
Oh my god.
She smiles, and you feel a strange tingle up the back of your neck. Something carnal inside of you causes your body to break out in sweats. You feel like the luckiest man in the world. She sits alone just like every other day and looks out the window lost in her thoughts. You know that look. She's just as alone as you are, but she doesn't have to be. You could talk to her. Tell her you'd love to sit next to her today and every other day because life is short and no one deserves to ride the bus alone.
Death of Dick Long covered ideas of sexual perversion and poked fun at people's obsessions with crime stories, along with showing how fast news in small communities can spread like wildfire. Can't say more without spoiling the twist, so please sit down and watch this movie, it's fantastic. And Everything Everywhere is in the same vein, though the scale is a lot larger than their other movies. It's one of those stories where more and more layers are added as it goes on. It starts off as a small personal story of a family dealing with mundane headaches. Our protagonist, Evelyn, has to handle a failing business, a failing marriage, her father father coming to America for a visit, a Chinese New Year's party, her estranged daughter coming out as a lesbian. Very relatable problems that feel like they would show up in any other family drama. But then it's revealed that the story is far larger than you expected. Michelle Yeoh plays Evelyn, and she is the central figure to the story. Her journey is the one that takes precedence over all else. Now, originally, the role was written for Jackie Chan, funny enough, but they decided to rewrite the role for a woman and cast Michelle Yeoh, which I do think serves the movie better in the end. It definitely helps that she's also starred in multiple action films, stuff like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Tomorrow Never Dies, among others, so when it comes time for action scenes, she can more than hold her own. Yet the detail that I think really works is how unassuming Evelyn is as a character. She's just a random housewife, a complete mama-san archetype that you've probably met in real life tons of times. The super nice but strict Asian lady that nags her family's ears off any chance she can get. So taking a character like that and turning them into an action hero is perfectly in line with the out there style of humor this movie is shooting for. Now, she isn't a stereotype or an obnoxious caricature. Evelyn is a character that feels authentic and you want to see her win in the end. You see how much she regrets her choices in life, and the movie is unafraid to basically call her a complete loser. While she does become a badass action hero, Evelyn has more than a few moments of being utterly pathetic. The entire first act of the movie is about showing how much of a mess her life has become, and her desire to basically drop everything and run away. You also get hints at all the dreams Evelyn had in life, wanting to become a singer, a teacher, a chef, all the parts she feels like she lets slip through her fingers. Even when it comes time for Evelyn to be a badass, there's still plenty of moments where she fails or looks like a complete idiot. But this would require delving deeper into the film itself, and I'm not really sure about that. I'll just go ahead and give a spoiler warning since the rest of the video will be dissecting a lot of plot stuff, and this is the kind of movie that really works by going in with as little as humanly possible. Going in blind helps so much with both the humor and the story, trust me. Now, the movie is separated into acts, such as the beginning being Act 1, also known as Everything. It'll also have Act 2, which is Everywhere, and the final act, All at Once. So everything, everywhere, all at once.
He said it! He said it!
And as mentioned before, the very beginning is a lot more in line with just a down-to-earth family comedy. We see Evelyn trying to finish her taxes in time for a meeting at the IRS office, because they're in the middle of an audit, but while she's trying to do the audit, she's pulled around to different situations brewing up around a laundromat business her and her husband Waymond own. I didn't talk much about Waymond, since his presence mostly revolves around plot stuff, but I will say the guy is fantastic in the movie. He's actually played by the same actor that, I shit you not, played Short Round in Temple of Doom and Data from Goonies. He was in a bunch of different stuff as well, but these were his most famous roles. Ones that went on to define his career for a bit. Hell, he retired from acting back in 2002 simply due to not getting enough roles to justify keep going. But this movie and Finding Ohana, funny enough a love letter to the Goonies, reignited his career, at least a little. And honestly, he really fits in the role of Waymond. For one, having an actor that's basically just a direct reference to movies like Temple of Doom and Goonies is pretty much exactly in line with the kind of humor this movie is shooting for, especially in how his character is used. Waymond in the main universe, trust me, it'll get complicated, acts very much like a child at heart, just optimistic and simple-minded. He's not a complete moron or treated like he's a man-child, more that he's just a very positive guy. He's just happy to be with his family and own his own business. This is a direct contrast to the frustrated and exhausted Evelyn, which is actually the major theme of the film, nihilism versus optimism. Evelyn can't help but feel miserable about her life, thinking about what she could have been and regretting every step. While she's used to this life acting pretty much on autopilot as she handles all the chores around the house and the business, she's not happy, and it's very clear, to the point that even Waymond notices it. Her relationship with her daughter Joy is especially troubled. The two are very strained, Evelyn's own troubled childhood affecting her abilities as a parent to her own kid. And it doesn't help that Joy is a lesbian, something that's kind of frowned upon in Chinese culture, something that's especially going to be a problem since Evelyn's father is coming over for a visit from mainland China. James Hong is awesome, by the way. Gotta love David Lopan.
Who are these people? Friends of yours, huh? Now, this really pisses me off to no end. Come on, stick around!
Still, there are signs that something weird is going on. First one being that Waymond seemingly explodes into some over-the-top acrobatics routine in the middle of the laundromat. It's nothing any of the characters notice, however, so it's not ever addressed. No, the real weird stuff happens when they go to the IRS office for the meeting. Evelyn, Waymond, and Gong Gong, what they call James Hong's character, enters the office and go into the elevator. There, Waymond has another episode, this time directly telling Evelyn they are in danger. Turns out, it's Alpha Waymond, a version of him from an alternate universe, one that developed technology to travel across the multiverse. Every choice made creates a new timeline, and with this universe's technology, they can access the skills, memories, and even take over the body of whatever alternate version of themselves are out there. He tries to warn Evelyn of a growing threat coming for them, a multi-dimensional entity named Jobu Tupaki, but she's too focused on the audit going well to care. By the way, the IRS agent is played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is fucking hilarious in this. Absolutely great casting all around. Still, things come to a boil when Evelyn accidentally causes a scene at the IRS, causing Alpha Wayman to come in and help her by beating the asses of these security guards about to arrest them.
Enjoyed the lash of the spanking.
From here, things devolve into absolute chaos, with the building going into lockdown and the godlike entity that Alpha Wayman was trying to warn her of discovering their universe. Now, I'm not going to do a complete play-by-play of the movie because that would really spoil the fun, and you should sit down to watch this in full. This was mainly to set the stage of what you're about to get into. There's already a bunch of details that had to be skipped over just to give a general setup of the first act, and that wasn't even what I was intending to do. Hell, there's tons of reincorporated elements that I haven't mentioned. From this point on, I'm going to assume you either saw the movie or don't care about spoilers, because some of this is actually really cool and clever, and I want to point out how cool the attention to detail was with this. So when I mention reincorporation, this is what I mean. You have the obvious stuff. The googly eyes that Wayman puts on stuff around the laundromat is later used as a contrast to the black hole Jobu Tupaki creates. The statue Jamie Lee Curtis points out is used for purposes during a later fight scene. The redneck guy at the laundromat points out how Evelyn's perfume reminds him of his dead wife, and in the final fight, Evelyn manifests a bottle of the perfume to spray it in his face. You see a sign spinner as they drive to the IRS building, which comes into play later when Evelyn jumps into a version of herself that also works as a sign spinner. But then you have the stuff you might have missed, such as seeing the dark spot on the ceiling of the laundromat, which is a hint at the black hole in Jobu's presence. Also, the van that Alpha Wayman and his crew are driving around in is the same laundry van that the characters in the main universe use. There are a lot of factors that come into play as the story goes on, but there's nothing so cryptic and hidden that you wouldn't spot them with enough rewatches. It wants you to find these things and put the connections together yourself. Hell, one of them is a very direct parody of Ratatouille that is set up by a single conversation in the movie.
It's like that movie. That movie.
Okay, what are you talking about?
Rakakuni. What? Rakakuni. You know the one with the chef? And he makes bad food. Pui. And then this raccoon sit on his head. Ooh, control him. And then he cooks good food.
Do you mean Ratatouille?
Ratatouille? I like that movie.
Which later becomes a plot point.
Now we're cooking. While nobody's looking.
I don't know what I'd do without you.
Also, the raccoon is voiced by Randy Newman, because of course he is. Still, you get the idea. There's a lot of really cool foreshadowing and Easter eggs that you can pick up on if you watch it enough times and pay attention to certain scenes. But that's not to say that's the only strength of the movie, just in the structure and the foreshadowing. No, the characters are actually very, very likable. I've already talked about Wayman and Evelyn, so I do feel like I should talk about the villains of the movie, Jobu Tupaki and Alpha Gong. It's revealed that Jobu is actually an alternate version of Evelyn's daughter. In the Alpha timeline, Evelyn was the one to invent multiverse technology. While experimenting with this, she pushed her daughter too far and accidentally turned her into a being that exists in every single timeline all at once. She feels everything in every timeline, sees all outcomes, and has gone completely insane, fully consumed in nihilism and desperate to hunt down a specific version of Evelyn. At first, we're led to believe it's to kill her, since we see her explode the mind of the version of Evelyn that went into the janitor's closet with Alpha Wayman, but it's later revealed that she has no interest in actually killing her. Instead, Jobu wants this version of Evelyn, since she will become an entity just like Jobu Tupaki. She wants someone that understands what she's going through, to see if there's something in life that she's just missing or not understanding, and eventually, she wants the both of them to join together in a black hole she created to commit suicide. That's actually something really interesting about Everything Everywhere. The villains of the story are very sympathetic. Yes, Jobu is completely psychotic, and some people just might not even buy her as a villain, since she can get pretty goofy. She's one of those zany, insane villains, and whether or not that actually works for you and you find her threatening is completely up to you. She does do a lot of fucked up shit though. I mean, she kills more than a few people. Yet, on the other hand, she's someone suffering a hell beyond description and has gone insane. She's quite literally experiencing every single possibility all at once and is broken because of it. Her main plan isn't to end the multiverse or destroy all life. It's to find someone like her so she can figure out if there's even a point to living. And if that doesn't work, she just wants to die. She didn't want to be alone when it happened. Her reasoning also makes sense when you really break it down. When you see all of existence across the entire multiverse, it would make you feel as if well, nothing matters. Why care what happens in one universe if you can just hop over into a new one like nothing ever happened? It doesn't make what she does okay. She's still killing people and doing fucked up shit, but you understand and feel bad for her. Now on the opposite spectrum, you have Alpha Gong Gong, the leader of the Alphaverse group trying to stop Jobu. While he's directly in conflict with her and her followers, he ends up being another antagonist himself, as he views the only solution being to kill the Joy in the main universe so Jobu can't use her body, and also Evelyn, so she can't be corrupted into being the same entity. While he might seem like a complete asshole because of this, you do see the pain and grief he feels making choices like this. He doesn't like having to kill his family over and over again, but he sees it as the only solution to protect countless lives in each universe. End of the day, it's still his daughter and his granddaughter they're dealing with. It's just the consequences of failure are so high that it's just not a fun situation to be in. The story makes it clear that both sides are incapable of finding a real solution. Evelyn is the one that has to find a way to both stop Jobu's rampage and save her daughter in this universe. The movie goes out of its way to show that killing is not the solution here. Hell, all of the bad guys that Evelyn has to fight are just random people taken over by alternate versions of themselves. She can't just kill them. You can beat their asses though, since that's fun.
Holy shit.
Is he dead? See? Not dead. Go.
The point is that doing what Jobu and Gong Gong do is not what's gonna fix things. They've been fighting the same battle for years with no real results. Hell, Jobu barely even considers them a threat, because really, they aren't. She's basically a god. Instead, Evelyn has to embrace her role as sort of the chosen one to become an entity like Jobu, but to be the opposite. This is where Wayman comes into play. While Joy is miserable and depressed, clearly taking after her mother and sort of repeating the cycle, Wayman just genuinely enjoys life. He truly does love his wife and daughter, and his character really shows you how much Evelyn was taking for granted even while she was convinced she was a miserable loser. While she is bitter about everything, worried about the business failing and believing her life would have been better if she never married him, Wayman simply wanted her to be happy. And the worst part is that he knows she's miserable. Throughout the first act, there are numerous moments where you see Wayman filed for divorce papers, which then turns into a full-blown argument in the IRS office after they cause the security guards to come in and try to arrest them. It's not that he wants to divorce her, just that she's so miserable in her marriage that he feels like she doesn't love him. The conversation in the van after the tax meeting, when Jamie Lee Curtis tries to kill the main universe Evelyn, is actually pretty painful.
如果我们没有结婚的话，也许我们会更幸福。
我从来没说过。
你根本不用说，你的眼神已经告诉我了。
He really doesn't want to lose his family, it's just that he believes it's come to an end and that this is what Evelyn really wants. This is one of the big conflicts in the movie. Evelyn sort of takes her family for granted and is faced with the reality that she's very close to losing them for good. It forces her to look at how she's been treating the people she cares about and realize her mistakes. End of the day, the movie really emphasizes being kind to other people, to have empathy and see how your actions could hurt someone. It sounds pretty childish, but that's actually something the movie directly addresses. In the timeline where Evelyn became a kung fu action star, where she never married Wayman and stayed in China, we see that this life is full of glitz and glamour, kind of basically being a reference to Michelle Yeoh's actual life, to the point that she directly tells Alpha Wayman that she wants to stay in that timeline, and remarks how much happier she would be if they never got married. Well, she actually meets him years later at a premiere for one of her movies. While she denied him, thinking they'd simply be broke losers in America, which did end up happening, we see that Wayman became a successful CEO. Turns out, even after all that time, Wayman is still a positive guy that tries to see the best in life, because to him, it's how he copes with the world. He knows he can't be a fighter or anything like how Evelyn is, so he just wants to enjoy the life he has. The guy still loves her too, directly saying that he would have been happy being a loser so long as they were together. Heartfelt moments like this really elevate the movie, give you something to latch onto and care about what's happening. It especially helps that this ends up being a pretty major moment in the story, since it helps Evelyn resist Jobu's influence and come back to reality. The movie clearly doesn't like the idea of simply throwing your hands up and going nothing matters. The story is specifically about finding meaning in the midst of all the craziness and spreading good vibes. It's a feel-good movie, that's pretty obvious. Now the humor is all over the place. Not in quality, I think the movie is pretty damn funny, just that there's a ton of different styles of jokes. You have quiet, awkward humor, completely insane, absurdist jokes, gross out jokes, references to various movies, dark dark comedy where characters are injured or killed in goofy ways, it's a melting pot to say the least. One of the main mechanics of the movie, verse jumping, involves characters doing completely random and insane things out of nowhere, so the universe is shaken in a way that lets them hop realities. It's mostly an excuse for kooky sequences, but the fact they added that little detail is fun, especially since you see Waymond jump more than once before he actually explains the mechanic. It adds something to make you think about previous scenes in a new light, but the oddest detail is how often completely goofy stuff can come up again in dramatic contexts. For example, you have the universe Evelyn accidentally jumps to where humanity evolved to have hot dogs for hands. It's such a dumb one-note gag, something you think comes up once and never shows up again, but it's used more than a few times, and actually explores more of Evelyn's character, mainly her resentment of Joy's sexuality, as in the hot dog timeline, she's in a lesbian relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis's character. It's still mostly a joke, I mean they have to carry stuff with their feet, but having that little extra layer behind it helps it move beyond just being a forgettable gag. Same with the Ratatouille parody universe. First time you see it, Evelyn jumps into the world simply to acquire more combat skills, but it comes back as a payoff to the earlier scene, when Evelyn ranted about Raccacoonie, and then it comes back a third time as when Evelyn has her mental breakdown and causes chaos in all her timelines, exposing the raccoon to the customers at the restaurant and ruining her co-worker's life, but she decides to help him get the raccoon back as a way to make up for what she did. There are more jokes than just this, and not everything ends up coming back in a major way, but it wouldn't be fun to just dryly explain all the jokes in a comedy movie, kinda defeats the purpose. Instead, let's talk about the action. Now the actual fight scenes of the movie are great. You have these really over-the-top kung fu sequences that have a lot of creativity behind them. One of my favorites in the whole movie is when Evelyn jumps into the timeline where she both is a sign spinner and a professional singer. So you have this classical Chinese song playing while she beats the shit out of people with a riot shield. There's a lot of thought behind how each timeline could be used, and there's plenty of imagination in each fight. It's very obviously a tribute to martial arts films, and I'd say that it manages to stand on its own as a pretty damn good one. So really, Everything Everywhere is a triple crown for me. It's funny as hell, has genuinely fantastic action scenes, and manages to be truly emotional. There's obviously a lot of passion that went into this. Hell, the effort it must have taken to film this alone is mind-boggling. There are sequences where characters are hopping between timelines mid-fight, and they're completely changing costumes, makeup, the sets, everything. Jobu especially is constantly shifting her outfits. Sometimes the detail can get as small as the color of her fingernails, and you get glimpses of the timelines she moves through to get to Evelyn. Some of these shifts can be mere frames, but they still took the time to organize all these visuals. It even plays with the aspect ratio, shifting down to fit a more action movie vibe when the situation at the IRS office turns to violence. And what's funny is that the scale isn't even really that large when you put it on paper. You have the laundromat in the IRS office as the major locations, and everywhere else is part of the alternate timelines and not shown to any extensive degree. Now I say that, but you still get a few scenes in them. The Alpha timeline is shown 3 or so times. The hot dog timeline shows Jamie Lee Curtis's apartment and comes up more than once. The restaurant timeline shows the hibachi place in the streets outside. The Kung Fu and Singer timeline take place in China. It hops around to more than a few places, but the main plot stays in the IRS building and the laundromat, and that's where pretty much all the action scenes take place until the end confrontation against Jobu, which I think is fine. Better to flesh out a handful of locations than just kind of give glimpses to a whole bunch, you know what I mean? No point in wasting a bunch of time and money making everything feel bigger than it needs to be. You get the point of the small locations and what they're used for. I did like Jobu's weird god dimension though. The plain white temple contrasting with the black hole. I thought it looked cool. And actually that ends up kind of being a part of the philosophical elements to the movie, where people have found a lot of comparisons between the conflict of Jobu and Evelyn with Buddhism. You know, you have the yin yang. The googly eye represents the white with the black in it, and the black hole is the black with the white in it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you dug deep into a lot of the symbolism there, you could probably find a lot to kind of talk about, but I don't really know about that stuff. I mainly thought it just looked cool. All in all, I absolutely love this movie. It is a fantastic action comedy, and I highly recommend you guys check this out. If you love goofy comedies, you'll enjoy it. If you like badass martial arts movies, you'll enjoy it. If you like heartfelt family stories, this will work for you. There's a reason why this movie spread so much by word of mouth, because it earned a lot of the hype behind it. I really want you guys to sit down and check this out to get the full context behind everything. You won't regret it. All in all, this year has actually been pretty great with movies. We have this, we have The Northman, incredible weight of massive talent, Top Gun, Incantation, a lot of good little gems coming out. It's not all trash, guys, I promise. Until next time, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys. Hey, loser, do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're going to be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's going to look at you funny. There's going to be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt. I will call the police, tell them how you're not buying my shirt. They're going to plant crack in your house, and they're going to arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.